That's a terrible question for a very intelligent lady. As you get older, you learn that it's not about you. Failure is part of life, but it's also a very valuable part of life because that's when you learn the most. They got emotional because it was all about how to become the best in the world. I had always been pretty successful because I had very good teams. Good coaches have good teams. I resigned because I knew that I couldn't do the job anymore. I just needed to have some space. The goal was to be the best sporting team in the world. I thought afterwards, hell, Ted, if you'd done that with the All Blacks, they may have been better. We won one game by 100 points. We won another game by 80 points. And you just get into this, you're almost invincible, which is the recipe for disaster.
My name is Kyla Colbin. You're listening to my interview with Sir Graham Henry, and this is the Hunger and Heart Podcast. Enjoy the show. Hello, my name is Kyla Colbin, and welcome to episode 10 of Hunger and Heart, a podcast on the intersection of wild ambition and fierce compassion. Thank you, danke, grazie, domo arigato for tuning in. The pod now has listeners from all over the world, and it is very exciting. Please do write in with your thoughts, comments, questions. You can reach me at hello@kylacolbin.com. And of course, if you are enjoying the pod, please do follow, like, share, review the algorithm, and I thank you. My guest today is none other than Sir Graham Henry, or Ted as he is known. Ted led the All Blacks to win the 2011 Rugby World Cup. He was also named IRB Coach of the Year a record 5 times. He was also responsible for New Zealand's worst ever performance at a Rugby World Cup. In this conversation, we talk about how going through depression transformed his approach to coaching, the mentorship system that kept the All Blacks in line, and the danger of complacency. So here you are, my conversation with Sir Graham Henry. What's your experience with wild ambition and fierce compassion?
I think you're probably mellow with age. You know, you got wild ambition, and as you get older and you learn that it's not about you, it's about others. Well, it's always about you, isn't it? But if you can help others who are also in the group to grow and take ownership and take responsibility, and that shared responsibility, if you've got shared responsibility, you're very more likely to achieve that growing ambition that you've got. Mm-hmm. So from my experiences, I had a lot of ambition, but as I grew and as the task got more difficult, I started to understand that it was growing the other people with me that was important, and getting other people to help me grow those younger people, so they took more ownership of whatever you were trying to achieve and took more responsibility. And I think the mentoring in the group is hugely important. Having more experienced people mentoring less experienced people made a massive difference to the organisations I was in. And not only helped the young guys or the younger people in the group, but also helped the older people, because they enjoyed that experience and they got a lot from that. So both people grew, and both people got a lot of benefits from that mentoring system. So I hope, Carlo, I've answered the question.
We've only just begun, Ted.
Oh.
You've given me an answer, but it's raised more questions for me. So you mentioned that you kind of evolved this over time, that you used to, you didn't previously have as much of a kind of cultivating growth in the players and shifted more to how they can take more ownership. How did you learn that? What prompted that shift? And how did you learn what to do instead, or what worked instead?
Well, just let's qualify the first answer a wee bit first.
Great.
Again, when I was first coaching rugby and teaching, and I finished up being a school principal, I was doing a lot of different jobs, and you become very, very busy. You haven't got time to turn around, and so you just get things done. And I think it was part of the world anyway in those days, in the 1970s and 1980s and the 1990s. That's how people ran their lives, I guess. They just got on and got things done. But the education system changed and young people changed, and they want to have more of a say anyway. And you learn from times that you failed. I learned from adversity. I learned from the 14th of July, 2001.
What happened on the 14th of July, 2001?
Well, 14th of July 2001, I was the British and Irish Lions coach. That's a rugby team, which is one of the biggest brands in the game. And we got beaten by the Wallabies in Sydney on the 14th of July 2001, 29-23. And that changed my life. That adversity, I had always been pretty successful. And I was successful because I had very good teams. That's a little statement there. Good coaches have good teams. So I won most things that I was involved in, like 2/3 of the championships over a long period of time. And this is the first time that I had experienced defeat when I thought we should have won. And I thought, and I hit the wall actually, and I resigned from my job at the time, which was the Welsh national rugby coach. But it made me think a lot about how I was doing the job. And that's when the penny dropped, if you like. And I thought, I've got to do more to give these young guys greater responsibility and greater ownership. And I didn't know how to do that. It's just a thought. And that adversity, and it may not seem an adversity to most people, but for me at the time, it was massive. So I learned it wasn't about me. It was about them in the main, and how could I help them grow and them get better and them take ownership, greater ownership of the team. And then I got together with like-minded people like Wayne Smith and Gilbert No and people like that. And they had similar thoughts, so that was good. So that was the catalyst for the change. That was the reason for the change. But I was also lucky enough to get appointed All Black coach about 3 years later, or 2.5 years later, was it? 3 years later. And being able to put those thoughts into action.
Again, so many questions coming out of this. So my first question is, you lost the game 29-23. You say that, you hit a wall, and that was a catalyst for you learning that you needed to get the players to take more ownership of the game. What did you see in that 2001 game, or in that team, or in that campaign, that led you to that conclusion that the shift was necessary towards more player ownership?
Look, this has been going on for some time. Look, I've been coaching the game then for 30 years. I was 56, I think. Yeah, I think I was 56. And I've been doing the job for a long time. So it wasn't just that game, but that was a very good side led by Martin Johnson. Johnny Wilkinson was the first 5'8", or the fly half. There was a lot of very capable players in that group. And I coached like I'd always coached. I coached from the front. I was the main driver, and I just thought I had a lot of time to think. I resigned, got out of there. I came home from Cardiff to Christchurch, actually, and my wife was actually coaching the Welsh netball team at the time, so she didn't come back, and I had a lot of time. I did a lot of exercise, did a lot of running and walking, and got myself right. And all that time, I was thinking, how do you make this better? How do you improve this? And if you're going to get back into the game, and I was a fanatic, ridiculous. So I was very focused on trying to be the best coach I could be. And I had all this downtime, and I spent some time in Japan. I coached a university side in Japan with a guy named David Young, who had been the Welsh rugby captain during my time in Wales. And he was a good man, and we used to talk about these things a lot. And it just sort of, that idea was born over that time. But the catalyst, as I said, was the defeat. Otherwise, I wouldn't be talking to you now. So you learn a huge amount from adversity. And if you don't change, you're not going to get better. You're not going to improve. And I was fanatical about team success. Probably my success, but team success. And how do you try and make that happen? So that's where it came from. And society changed. Society changed. Education changed. Kids had more say in their education. Like when I was at school, you just did as you're told. And that probably went on for quite a few decades. I was in school in the 1960s. But it went on probably through to the turn of the century, maybe. And then, and so you were changing to suit the time anyway. I probably didn't think about that at the time, but that was a fact. So that was the reason.
Yeah, you mentioned the game was 29-23, and you said for some people that might not seem like a particularly, dramatic moment, but for you it was significant. Obviously, you've had an extraordinarily successful record, 87.4% win rate with the All Blacks. You had an extraordinarily successful run up until that British and Irish Lions engagement. One of the things that I've learned, I've got 3 stepsons and they play team sport, and I did not appreciate until I observed them in action the value of them having to fail over and over and over again. That when I watch them play, they miss a tackle, they got to jump up and try to get the next tackle. They miss one of them plays football, he misses a shot on goal, he's got to try again, another shot on goal. And that value that they get from failing over and over and over again, and knowing that's not the end of it, that they have to keep going. Do you feel that in some ways life was harder for you because you were so successful, that you had this loss, that then it hit you maybe harder than it might have hit you had you not, like, in a way, did your success kind of undermine your ability to cope with that British and Irish Lions loss?
Yeah, I think that's probably a fair assessment. Look, as I say, I was fortunate to coach some very good rugby teams over a long period of time. I think I think what you've just said, not about my particular loss, but it needs to be part of the education system. That kids need to know that failure is part of life. Not being successful in a particular game or a particular examination or a particular relationship or whatever it may be, is just part of life. And but it's also a very valuable part of life, because that's when you learn the most. And I don't know whether that is emphasized enough for our young people. And for me, it was massive. Like, we learned a lot more from adversity. It was not easy at the time, don't get me wrong. It was very difficult, but you learn a lot more from from failure, adversity, than you do from success. If you could find the recipe for learning from success, that would be fantastic. But, you always, you have a good run and you get a wee bit complacent and you get a little bit comfortable and you get knocked over and you continue to learn. So I've often discussed this with people about learning from adversity and young people understanding that hard times are part of life. And that's when you learn the most. And they just got to accept that. I think a lot of our young people think should always be smiling and successful. It's not like that.
On that topic of learning from adversity, and specifically on the topic of it sucks at the time. I heard you say just now, you had this loss, you hit a wall, and you came back to Aotearoa, to New Zealand. You had some time to reflect. I've heard you, I watched a few interviews to prep for this conversation, and I've heard you describe that time experiencing a period of depression. And my question for you is, sometimes when people experience depression, so I don't presume to know what your experience was like. Sometimes when people experience depression, there's like a kind of almost like a drowning sensation, and there sometimes has to be a kind of a catalyst to get us out of it when we're in the midst of it. What did you do, or what did you experience, or how did the people around you come together, or how did you come out of that in order to get those critical lessons and then apply them in a new way with the All Blacks?
Oh, it's a long question, it's a long answer. I resigned. So I got out of the heat. And I was being paid big money at that time, coach. So it wasn't something you give away easily. So I resigned because I knew that I couldn't do the job anymore at that point in time. And I just needed to have some space. Also, I had wonderful support. I've married well. I'm very fortunate. She's listening, so I'm going to emphasize that a bit more. But no, I had wonderful support from Raywin. And I just did what my instincts told me to do. I started to exercise a lot more than I normally did. And there's a huge correlation between the physical and the mental. And so I started to feel good about myself again, but I had no responsibility. And then all of a sudden I got this phone call from Japan, said, would you come and coach us? And this was at a university in Japan. It was at a university. And I'd coached them before, probably 15 years prior. And I knew that would be good, because the Japanese only invite you when they're good, because they would be embarrassed if they weren't good. So they were a great group of young guys to coach. I was there for about 6 weeks, stayed with David Young, as I said before. He was a great company, and just got back into the game. And then I came back to Auckland feeling good, because Wazata won the Japanese university title. And I knocked on Auckland Rugby Union's door and got back into the game as an assistant coach. I went from $1 million New Zealand coach to 25,000 New Zealand dollars over a period of about 6 months. But I was back in the game. I was back in doing the job. And for the first time in my life, I became an assistant coach, and I really enjoyed it, because you don't have the ultimate responsibility, which enabled me to get tighter with the players. And we had success. I helped the Blues and I helped Auckland, and they won 3 championships in a row in 2002 and 2003, and I played for the All Blacks, and I was fortunate enough to be appointed. So out of that adversity comes something that I'd dreamt about for 35 years.
Thank you so much for sharing that story. Here's what I heard. I want to make sure I've caught it correctly. What I heard is you went through a hard period,
and the things you did to come out of it. Number one, exercise, the connection between our physical state and our mental state. And then number two, huge support around you from Raywin, and I imagine others. And hi, Raywin. And I will be asking more questions about Raywin in just a moment. And then three, what I heard is a kind of like laddered return to the harshest of spotlights. And so, you went from this $1 million a year job to a $25,000 a year job. Before you did that, you started in Japan, which, even though I imagine for them the stakes would have been really high, there's okay, I'm gonna come back into this in a way that is like the right steps for where I'm at mentally, emotionally, etc. Have I understood all that correctly?
Yeah, I don't know if it was planned as well as that. It just was circumstantial.
Yeah.
I got this offer to go to Japan. We lived in Auckland. I'd gone to Christchurch, picked up my parents and took them to Akaroa, which is a little French settlement in just out of Christchurch, which I used to go there as a kid, for holidays. And they've got a forest at the top of Akaroa. It's a harbour. I used to run the forest every day. So, no, it was just, yeah, that's how it worked out, but it wasn't planned quite like that. I think the big thing was getting out, giving yourself some space. The Welsh Rugby Union, a guy named David Pickering, who was the manager of the team when I coached, and we're good mates, they were fantastic to me. They didn't want me to coach the Lions. They said it's too much. I said, of course I can. And then they finished up supporting me. So yeah, they were great, and it was just getting that space to recuperate and get back to normal. The running thing, I just did. I exercise anyway, but I did a lot more, and that became a really positive thing to do, because, as I said, there's a massive connection between feeling good physically and your mental state. And as I said, I had fabulous support. Rayon was fantastic. David Pickering was fantastic. The Welsh Union could have been difficult for me. I'd still had 18 months of my contract to go. So yeah, it was, and I just got into the right positions. Like Japan was a good step, good young, intelligent guys who play some good footy, and then come back to Auckland where I'd coached for years, and they let me in to assist. They could have said no.
What was that assisting experience like? So you mentioned that you really enjoyed it because you didn't have ultimate responsibility, which at the time sounds like the right place for you to have been. At the same time, you're a hugely ambitious man. You're obviously someone with strong ideas, and someone who is kind of unafraid to take charge or be held accountable. How was it for you being a follower or being a support to the head coach?
Wayne Pivac was the coach, actually. Wayne Pivac and Grant Fox for the Auckland team. And Grant I'd coached at school and at club and at representative level, and I knew Wayne, and they were great, but they gave me the defence responsibility. So I became the defence coach. So I had a little packet where I was responsible for, and we would talk a lot. And so they gave me an opportunity to express my views. And hopefully, they might have learned something from that, because I'd coached a lot longer and at a higher level than they had. So I think they benefit from that as well, and I benefit from getting the opportunity. And I'm not shy to express my point of view. So we used to have little sessions where we'd meet at 8:00 and just have a little talk fest for an hour and talk the game, and often we'd solve problems doing that, and we'd add to what we were doing, and it wasn't all my ideas, obviously, but their ideas, and they were like Wayne was a very good representative rugby player. Foxy was a legend as an All Black. he ran the team. You know, he was the navigator of the All Blacks for a long time. So you got good heads there. And then the first season was with the Auckland team, and then they won, and the Blues asked me to do the same thing. And so that was great too, and the same sort of situation.
I promised you I was going to have more questions about Raewyn, who obviously, yes, you married well, and she is a legend in her own right, in terms of her accomplishments. What are some things that you've learned from Raewyn over the years that you feel you might not have gotten to on your own?
Goodness me. Well, she's fantastic people person. She was a school teacher, and they still, you know, she still runs into girls she used to teach, and they just love her because she had the ability to connect with them, much better than her husband, much better than her husband. So no, she was fantastic people person. She coached Auckland netball, coached Welsh netball, went over to coach a club team in Cardiff. Well, she was married to me, so she went to Cardiff to support me, and they asked her to coach a club team, and then she was asked to coach the Welsh team. They still connect, those girls, and the boys don't connect with me. So what's the situation? Is it a girl thing? Is it a connection thing? I don't want to go down there. So, yeah, so she was very good at that. She's very good at connecting with people and getting close to people and helping people, and she's still doing it. In our community on Waiheke, she's still helping people. And she also, you know, she knows rugby, she knows sport. And you can sit down and talk, and she knew what was going on. You know, there was no hiding, but she knows rugby, and she was always a great supporter of when I was coaching. She'd watched a bit of footy, and she'd talk rugby with me, because she came from a rugby family. That's not why I married her, though. She was the only daughter, and she had two brothers and a father, and they all played at a high level, and father coached and so on. So there was a good skill to have when she's married to me. I benefited greatly. And also when I became All Black coach, she got the girls together and they had a good time. You know, the wives club, if you like, and the coaches' wives, they got together and had some social functions and enjoyed each other's company and connected well. And because it can be lonely because your husbands or your boyfriend's away for long periods of time. So she's got these people skills, and she's a lovely person, and she can do that. Good to have contrasts, none.
She is a lovely person. I've had the good fortune, obviously, of spending some time with you both. Is there anything in the way that you evolved your coaching over time that was inspired specifically by her?
Oh, probably. She picked Conrad Smith. Did she ever tell you that?
No.
Oh, well, she used to watch rugby. I'd be around the country going to various games, and she'd watch on TV. And she said, "That guy Conrad Smith, he can play." I said, "Not you too." There's other people that said that to me. So Conrad always thinks she selected him. It's the only reason he got in the All Blacks. The guy, I think, you know, the people skills thing. As I got older, I think I got better at it. It wasn't a strength. And I don't know what the boys would say. Hopefully they don't watch this. But I think it certainly rubbed off.
On that front, you went through this experience with Wales. You went through this experience with the Lions, Japan, Auckland, Blues, All Blacks. You get to 2007. what happens?
Ah, another adversity. I think probably the base for it was complacency. So we got into a situation where we'd won 90% of our test matches for 3 years. We'd beaten the French by 50 points about 3 months prior to the quarterfinal. We got beaten by the French 20 points to 18. I think that was the score. And so the basic problem is that we got comfortable. And we thought we were heading back for the semi in France, and France wasn't going to be a problem in the quarter. I would say that's the major reason. We had a few difficulties with the officials on the day of the game, but we should have been better than that. We should have been able to overcome that, and we didn't. We choked. So you put all these things in place, and you empower the players, and you've got a great leadership group, and you have great success, and all of a sudden, bang, the building is knocked over. And so, and we were lucky, we were Steve Hansen and Wayne Smith and myself, we were the 3 coaches, and we were lucky enough to get reappointed.
So there are a couple of things in there that I think are so important. One is we can do everything right and still not get the outcome that we're wanting. Like you mentioned that you choked, or you didn't play as you got complacent, and in my experience, you're playing a game where there's a winner and a loser, and so you can do everything right and still not get the outcome you want. Or one of the ways I frame this often in an entrepreneurship world is we have to do everything right and we have to get lucky. How did your experience coping with the British and Irish Lions loss and the hitting the wall after that and going through the process of coming out of that, how did that inform the way that you responded to that 2007 loss with the team, with your fellow coaches, and then with the wider public?
Hugely beneficial. Hugely beneficial to go through two adverse situations, which were massive for me at the time. But because I'd gone through 201, the Lions, I handled it hell of a lot better. Because you build a personal game plan to look after yourself, because there's a lot of scrutiny when you're All Black coach, and so there's a lot of criticism. Some of it positive. Can you have positive criticism and negative?
Criticism that comes from a place of caring.
Yeah. So it was difficult, but didn't go through the same experience I did in 201, because I had things in place to look after myself, I guess. And also the Lions, no criticism, but I knew nobody. And the All Blacks, you had a group of people who were pretty tight. And so you supported each other. And so that's helpful as well. But I think the big thing is that, you get into a situation, I think we won our round robin games, the qualifying games for the quarterfinal, when we won one game by 100 points. We won another game by 80 points. And you just get into this mold of, well, you're almost invincible, which is the recipe for disaster. And it certainly was the recipe for disaster. And we'd beaten this French side by a big score not long before. So although you look back and think complacency, at the time, and if you go through it again, you'd know, wouldn't you? But we hadn't gone through it. So there we are.
So, you said there was some questions about the officialing, the refereeing on the day, which I also have questions about, and you take accountability for not playing as well as you could have. When you're talking to your players and they're going, how do I process this loss and process this setback? How do you balance like caring for their hearts with, yeah, and you didn't play as well as you could have, and you did get complacent? Like, how do you navigate those two things? Does that make more sense?
Yeah, well, as you could appreciate, this was the last game.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're not the coach anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So after the game, like, we went back to our hotel and we had a meeting,
Mm-hmm.
and everybody spoke, and we were in a big semicircle, and you can do all those things and do them the best you can, and you got sports psychologist Gilbert No running that session, and we're all pretty down, as you can imagine. Like, it was 4 years of planning out the window. So it's a very difficult time. And I think it was done very well, but, you know, what can you do, really? You're not, straight after the game, you're not looking at the game and analysing the game. You're thinking about, how do you get through the next 2 or 3 weeks? You know, and the game's finished. You go back to the game if you get reappointed and you're the coach. But you don't do the game right there. It's just about trying to make the best out of a very difficult situation, and which we tried to do.
Clearly, if it's the final game, the knockout at a knockout stage in the World Cup, as you say, that's the last game, and that moment you're not the coach anymore because you don't know yet whether you'll be reappointed. How would you process a loss when it's not the final game? How would you balance okay, yep, you've got a setback and you've got to find some mental resilience in order to cope with that setback and come back and get ready again. And we need to hold you to account for, these, missing that tackle or, making that forward pass or whatever it is. Look at me with the rugby terms. How do you navigate those things?
Oh, like, that's all part of the deal, isn't it?
Mm.
Every coach does it. And I think every coach goes through those situations. I think you probably work a bit harder. You're more determined. And if you're with an All Black group, I think defeat probably galvanizes the team more than anything else, during my time anyway, and I'm sure that's still the case. So everybody analyzes themselves and the game, but the coaches are working that night. They're on the job because they've got to present on the Monday, and so Sunday's a big day as well. Just to try and analyse what we did well and what we didn't do well and how we can turn that around. And there'll be some thought about how we prepared for that game. And like, as All Black coach in those days, you were expected to win every game. That was just the way of the world. And so there must have been a reason why you didn't win that way. But sometimes you've got to give credit. And, we had some very good, the Wallabies were good in our time. The Springboks were up and down, but could be very good too. So you've got to give a bit of credit there too, obviously, which we sometimes find hard to do. No, I think it just galvanizes you, makes you more determined. I think you've got to be honest. You can't, it has to be black and white. And you get better at it as you get older, I think. Because it's you don't want to destroy people, and you want to grow people, so you've got to do that pretty well. Whether I did it that well, I'm not sure, but I tried to.
What I'm hearing you describe is a learning culture where something goes wrong. You've mentioned several times we learn more from adversity. You mentioned after a game, you're going to look at what we did well and what we didn't. And in order to have a learning culture, obviously we have to have searing honesty of what went well and what didn't. I know for a lot of people, that kind of searing honesty becomes challenging because I made a mistake. What especially sometimes people who are high performers find it hard to look at the ways in which we're kind of not living up to the ideals or standards that we have. Was there anything in particular you did with the teams you were coaching to help drive the commitment to that learning culture, that we're always going to look at what went well and what didn't? And when we look at what didn't go well, it's not to punish ourselves, but it's so that we can continue to get better?
Yeah. You've done this before. Very good question. I think your culture of your group is massively important. And like the culture is just how you behave. A series of things of how you behave. Like you want to be the best in the world. So how do you do that? What are the behaviors you require to be the best in the world? And that's called culture, I think. Well, that's my definition, a set of behaviors. And our key behaviors were humble and hungry. So humble meant that it's a self-improvement environment. You're not the finished product. You can always improve. And the team, in the main, the vast majority buy into that. That's their job. That is their job, to self-improve. And the hunger is driving yourself to put those self-improvement things into action. And also be inspirational to the people around you. You know, this team, this culture, this group of young men have got a legacy that goes back 120 years, and we want to add to that legacy. That the All Black legacy is massive, and adding to that legacy is your job. And you're very lucky, very fortunate to be having into an environment that's got that history, got that legacy. So hopefully, because that's the players themselves, they built that culture. That's what they wanted. Like it wasn't my culture. It was their culture. It was a combination of people putting their heads together and saying, this is how we want to behave. And if you don't have that backbone of that set of behaviors and that purpose, you're wasting your time going out in the field and coaching a sporting team. So that's and it's a lot longer and deeper than that, but that's the basic skeleton. So you had a roadmap for them all the time. It's their job to keep on moving up the graph on their own ability and their hard work to do that. So yeah.
So I'm hearing hungry and humble. I'm hearing it's their job to do justice to the legacy of the All Blacks and to the jersey. I'm hearing it wasn't your culture, it's what came from them. And again, in some of the preparation that I did for this conversation, I am led to understand that that culture that you're describing was not the culture that you found when you joined the All Blacks as head coach. Can you talk to me a little bit about what the culture was like when you joined, and what any specifics you can share about what you did to turn it around in such a way? Actually, one more thing. What you did to turn it around in such a way that the new direction was coming from the team and owned by the team.
Yeah, as I keep on saying, I think rugby coaches generally coach like I did. There'll be some exceptions, Wayne Smith might have been an exception, I'm not sure. My old mate. But mainly rugby coaches coached from the front. They were hopefully motivational, but they drove the team with their ideas. And they may have had some collaboration in doing that with the other coaches and some of the senior players, perhaps. And through that adversity with the Lions and so on, and with rubbing shoulders with other people who became with me in the All Black management, we decided that we needed to try and give the players more ownership. So we formed a leadership group of 7 players and 6 management, and they sort of drove it, but also collaborated with the rest of the team to make sure everybody was on song with what we were doing. I don't know what the culture was like in the All Blacks before me. I wasn't there. So we just introduced this because we thought that was right. And we didn't introduce it straight away. Like it wasn't, you get named on such and such a date and you introduce the culture. That I got the All Blacks on a Sunday for the first time, and we had a test match against England on a Saturday. And so your whole focus is, how do we play well? And it took us a year, took us that first year to actually make the change. And Gilbert No, who was the sports psychologist, he was responsible. That was his baby. I was wanting to win rugby games. But I knew that we needed to do this. And yeah, some things are best not said. But we did have a situation in South Africa where we had a court session after a test match, and it was the last game of the series, the Tri-Nations, and we had a bad day. It was actually the 10th anniversary of Freedom Day in South Africa. So it was in 2004, and apartheid had been abolished in 1994. And we were playing at Ellis Park in Johannesburg, and Nelson Mandela was there. He was the greatest man who ever lived, I think, or the greatest human that ever lived. And he wandered out and congratulated the Springboks. Like he forgave a nation. He gave and changed the nation. Like I can't, my words can't justify the man. But anyway, I said to Wayne and Steve, 2 coaches with me in the box, I think we're in for a bit of a game, boys. Anyway, we got second by a reasonable margin. And we had a court session after in the hotel late at night, and it wasn't good.
What's a court?
What's a court session? A court session is when you have a judge and a jury, and you have compulsory drinking for misdemeanors over the last few months. Like it's the end of the series, right? Misdemeanors or fictitious misdemeanors. And so it gets ugly, and I'm thinking, hell, this is just not good. So that was the catalyst for immediate change, and we had some time. So we came back to New Zealand. We had about 2 months before we had the Northern Tour, the Northern Hemisphere Tour, and that's when we started to put things in place. And it made a massive difference to us.
I heard you say Gilbert No was in charge of that and you wanted to win rugby games. Did you ever have a feeling of like, come on, Gilbert, enough with the airy-fairy minds, emotion stuff. We just need to play good rugby? Was that ever a tension?
No. That's a terrible question for a very intelligent lady. No. Well, Gilbert and I were very tight. And we used to meet every night, virtually. That's an exaggeration, but most times, and just talk the day and how we could do it better tomorrow. So no, we're on the same page. He did say to me, he did say Rome wasn't built in a day, Ted. You know, I wanted these things to be put in place and functioning straight away. And he said, you just got to keep massaging it and to get better and better and better. And these guys will take more responsibility as they grow into the responsibility we've given them and the skills that we're trying to add to their repertoire of skills and so on. So he said, it'll get better and better as we go along. And I think you saw the result in 211 and 215. You know, 215 was probably the greatest All Black team that ever played the game. There'll be debate about that, but I finished in 211, but I think there was probably 11 guys who played in 215 final, played in 211. So they kept on growing, and the more experience they had, and not only playing the game, like we had some pretty good players. They could play a bit, you know, McCaw and Carter and Smith and Nonu and Reed and Mialamu, and I'm going to miss people. Tony Woodcock. Like you had Conrad Smith. They're a very experienced group of men, had been through a lot of battles together and learnt together. But I think the thing that Richie McCaw would say, because he, after 207, he was concerned about continuing as captain. And he said, I think the big thing is that I captained the side with 4, 5, 6, 7 other guys. He stood up together and led together. And that was the leadership group. And so they were very supportive, very demanding of each other, but very supportive of each other. And those leadership group meetings got very vulnerable at times. People got vulnerable, you know, they got emotional, because it was all about how to become the best in the world. And you're saying, and you have to be honest and say, well, Graham Henry, you're not good enough, or whatever. You need to improve. So apart from being tight as people, they were very frank with each other. And that's the best way, because they can handle criticism from their peers more than they can handle criticism from granddad. Does that sound understandable?
It's an excellent answer to a terrible question. I want to highlight something I just heard you say, which I think is so beautiful, which is that they cared, they supported each other, and they were demanding of each other. And this is something that's come through on the podcast over and over and over again, which is number one, when you have a team of people who are similar in terms of their ambition. So if you've got a casual footy team, great. You're not trying to win the World Cup. You might have a similar commitment in terms of how much you're going to train or not. When you're on the All Blacks, you have a similar commitment to, we want to be the best in the world. We're going to care for each other, and we're going to uphold that commitment, which means we're going to hold ourselves and each other to account. And having that be, we're all in this same boat together, holding ourselves and each other to account. The power of that I just heard from you is a beautiful thing.
Yeah, and also, you know, we had a system where the older fellas would mentor the younger fellas, which I think probably came from Raywin. And like, she's into mentoring, but for example, we had Brad Thorne in the team for quite a while, and he mentored Owen Franks, and Brad was 35 and Owen was 21. And that's just an example. And Brad was brilliant. Like, he's a very experienced athlete. We played for the Kangaroos in rugby league. He played for the All Blacks in rugby, been around a long time. And Owen's a new All Black, playing tight head prop in the strong man position in the scrum, and Brad's pushing on his bum. But Owen became world class in 18 months because Brad talked to him all the time and shared his experiences and how to handle pressure. And like, Owen thought Brad was his father. They were fantastic. And there was a lot of examples of Milton Enoch and Israel Dag, you know, same situation, older fellow, younger, same position. And that mentoring system in the All Blacks was hugely valuable. And if we had a problem, you know, guys a wee bit off the rails, a couple of the leadership group would sit down with them, have a coffee and have a chat. And that solves a lot of problems. Because they don't want to let their mates down. They don't want to let the guys that they go into battle down with down. And there's a lot of respect there. So that mentoring system with the empowerment of players taking ownership, the two keys, I think.
You mentioned using that mentoring system to help younger players learn how to deal with adversity or with pressure. I've also heard you say that success can breed complacency. You know, you're winning a game by 100 points, next game by 80 points, then you start to kind of believe your own hype. How have you evolved your thinking in terms of learning from success and measures you can put in place or approaches you can take such that success doesn't lead to complacency?
Difficult. I think you try and look ahead. You know, you try and look ahead and say, what do we need to do as a rugby team to stay ahead of the curve? And it sounds great, doesn't it? Sounds easy, but it's not so easy. And we try to do that. We try to get up there and look ahead and say, if we can develop these skills to this level, we're going to stay at the head of the curve, or we're going to change the game. Yeah, you try and do that, and you discuss that. Look, I was fortunate. I had Wayne Smith and Steve Hansen and Gilbert and Richie McCaw and Daniel Carter and Conrad Smith and Brad Thorne and Kevin Mialamu and Andrew Hoare and those guys, and leadership group. And we discussed the game, and you learned more from that discussion than I learned anywhere else. The intellectual property in your group is very powerful. Intellectual property on rugby in that group was massive. And we spent a week in New York, and we went to the football franchise and the basketball franchise and the baseball franchise, and we spent 2 days at each, and it was fantastic. And we learned, but the resources were just out of this world. Like hell. They have, oh, it doesn't matter, but just ridiculous. But you learn from that. But we learned more from those internal discussions. The guy learned more from Dan Carter and Richie McCaw, because they had to play the game. And they had to put up with the pressures of playing the game. Like Daniel, you always say to me, less is more, Ted, less is more. Because I had a menu, and he wanted that menu. And it's fantastic.
How did you go about creating an environment where your players felt comfortable giving you that kind of feedback of like, this is how I want and need to be coached?
I don't know if I did. You were assuming things that may not have occurred. Yeah, I think our leadership group, you know, we met every month out of season to fly to Wellington. There was a golf club right next to the Wellington airport. So that was a central point. We'd go to the golf club, spend the day talking, you know, setting up the foundations for the next season and what we needed to do better and so on and so forth. And then in the season, we'd meet 3 times a week. We chunked the season into 3 weeks, 2 weeks. So it was real time. So these are the things we want to do in those 3 weeks. And some of it was about enhancing the culture. Some of it was about improving the game. You know, so, and we met so often. And the goal was to be the best sporting team in the world. I know that's very arrogant, but that did happen. Not in my time, to be honest. But we were nominated 4 times for the Laureate Sports Team of the Year. No other sporting team's done that. So it makes you feel good that you're actually, that purpose of being the best is actually being achieved by that culture and that group of people. I can't remember the question now, but am I just rambling on talking about a lot of rubbish, am I?
It's all good. I've forgotten the question myself. I think we're getting close to the end of our time together. You mentioned right at the very beginning of this conversation that you've mellowed with age. Is there anything that you've learned, or what have you learned since you retired from coaching that maybe could have served you while you were coaching?
I coached the women. So I was involved with the women. That might be, I better qualify that. So the Black Ferns were playing a World Cup in New Zealand. Was it 23 or 22? And I was brought in as a mentor for the coaches and the players. And I loved it. And all I did was tell these girls how great they were. I just kept on pumping up their tires. And they were fantastic people, gone through a lot of adversity just to play the game. So they were very resilient. But Smithy was the coach, and he was outstanding. And they were trying to play a game they'd never played before, like a style of game, which took a lot of skill and a lot of risk and a lot of mental toughness, because they'd never done it. And they're playing a World Cup. And they've been beaten by France and England by big scores a few months prior. Well, just to try and get them to play this game was a major challenge for Smithy. And I just kept on telling them how good they were and how impressed I was. And just kept on being positive with them, because they were going into the unknown. And I thought afterwards, hell, Ted, if you'd done that with the All Blacks, they might have been better. Because that gets praise, obviously, but there's also a lot of scrutiny and a lot of honesty. But you just wonder. Look, I'm not shooting myself because I wasn't like that, but you just got into a different environment and you thought, oh, hell. And it worked, it helped. It helped.
I am so curious about this. I'm making up a bunch of stories about it, and I want to test the stories I'm making up with you. One of the stories I'm making up is that is a tactic that can only work if it's true. Is that an accurate story?
Do you think I was exaggerating?
No, I'm
Did they
saying
work?
if
Did
you'd
they
gotten
work?
there and they weren't that great, and you're going, you're great, would that have been as useful as it was, given that they were actually great?
Well, they finished up winning
Right.
the World Cup. I think they won by a point in the final game. I'm not sure. Can't remember. But sometimes I think to myself, you're exaggerating here, mate. You're pushing the boundaries on reality. But they were wonderful people, just so positive, so outgoing, just loved it. And I guess you did, like the boys would have said, you're talking a lot of shit, Ted.
So this is my other question. So you mentioned, what if I'd been that way with the boys? So I've heard a story from Smithy, but I want to hear it from you, which is about the difference between the men's and the women's team, and specifically the way that they would prepare for a game, and specifically the way they would prepare for a game on the bus on the way to the game. What was your experience with that?
Yeah, very noisy. Like the bus going to the tests with the All Blacks, there's not a word said. Total silence. People just focusing on self-preparation. Bus with the Black Ferns going to tests, you need earmuffs on, stop the noise. Everybody's talking and carrying on. Like the girls, Smithy would have told you, the girls need to feel good to play well, and the boys need to win to feel good. Difference.
Smithy also told me that you decided to not take the bus with the women.
God, there's only a certain amount you can handle. Yeah? Yes, exactly. Anyway, good to talk.
So good to talk. Thank you so much for taking the time. It's been absolutely delightful to spend this hour together.
Oh, well, it's all good fun, isn't it?
I always learn so much. Have a wonderful day. Say hi to Raywin.
Thank you so much for listening. Please do let me know your feedback. You can reach me on hello@kylacolbin.com. This might sound silly, but my favorite part of that podcast was when he was providing commentary on my questions. Like, ooh, that's an excellent question, or that's a terrible question. Like, he cannot stop himself from coaching. But the other thing that came through so clearly for me on that podcast was that he cannot stop himself from learning. And I feel very confident that that is what made him so extraordinarily successful. Thanks again for listening, and be sure to tune in next week for my conversation with inductee number 4 in the Crusaders Hall of Fame, Norm Maxwell. Hunger and Heart is brought to you by the Crusaders Leadership Programme. Whether you're coaching under fives or a professional team, we all want the same thing: to build a culture of trust, to get the best out of your people, and to grow players into leaders. The Crusaders Leadership Program lets you get up close and personal with some of the greatest rugby legends of all time. People like Sir Wayne Smith, Sam Whitelock, Kieran Reid. You'll connect with a global group of ambitious, caring coaches from a range of codes and backgrounds. And most importantly, you'll gain skills and techniques to drive impact and outcomes for your team. The Crusaders Leadership Program is a 2-week, high-intensity virtual experience. It is delivered exclusively online, accessible from anywhere. Hunger and Heart listeners get 10% off the full price of the program. Use the code HUNGER at checkout. You can find out more about the Crusaders Leadership Program at crusadersleadership.com. That's crusadersleadership.com. Hunger and Heart is created by BOMA and the entire BOMA team, including Tito Bernal, Ray Jangle, Hannah Hudson, Johanna Coxon, Sunil Unka, and me, Kyla Colbin. Thanks for listening.